Hello again. I was asked to talk briefly about some of the findings of my study Knowledge to Policy, and particularly about research and the politics of policy. In Module 1, I presented 4 cases from that study, all from Latin America. They illustrate the point that policy processes are not straightforward and they have to interact with other processes along the way. We saw that clearly in the Guatemala case, where they lost track of the political environment and so could not achieve the policy goal they sought. Politics plays a key role, and research evidence must always keep that in mind. Not necessarily agree, but be mindful. The 23 cases we investigated from around the world suggest some important issues in addressing the politics of policy processes that go beyond the evidence itself. 3 points here. First, direct the evidence to those who can use it. These could be community groups, that could be the media, could be advocacy organizations, or sometimes directly the policymakers themselves. But be clear on your target and think about how you communicate the evidence to meet their needs and their interests, not your own. Be agile. Policy contexts and political contexts change, sometimes very quickly. You have to be prepared to shift your policy to respond. The education finance team in Guatemala did not do this, whereas the Latin American Trade Network team succeeded effectively at that. Third, be prepared for setbacks. Patterns of policy development are not straightforward. Victory is never complete. Conditions and therefore policy needs continue to change. Persistence, trust building, and proposing solutions are important factors. The NGO fighting the copper mining corporation was able to build trust with the community and propose viable solutions that worked for both the corporation and the community. The researchers looking at high-altitude artisanal mining did not succeed in this regard. The chapter goes on to raise 4 areas that are particularly important in managing the politics of influence. The first is around partnerships and networks. Deploying appropriate skills and resources usually means working in partnerships. Research is often a lonely affair, but policy research, to be used, needs to embrace the full range of skills needed for its application. Sometimes partnerships are directly with policymakers, and one needs to remain open to that possibility and seize the opportunity. But it usually happens at the request of policymakers, not the suggestion of researchers. But researchers need to be attuned so that they actually hear the requests. Broad engagement with other researchers, with advocates, with the media, with policymakers and bureaucrats can also be extremely important. Perhaps in the artisanal mining case, if the researchers had been able to achieve broad dialogue and engagement, they might have had more success. Achieving a common vision also matters within a network. In the case of the Copper Mining Corporation, the NGO and the community held a common vision, which gave them a position of strength in creating the change that they wanted to see. The second area is communications. It's especially important. But from a dissemination perspective, it means several things. It first of all means dialogue, not monologue. You need to communicate ideas, but you need to hear what your target's needs really are. This is not as easy as it sounds, and it's especially hard if you hold a strong perspective on what the evidence says should be done. Second, communicate often. Long-term strategies pay off. Policy briefs look nice, but without being part of some long-term strategy, they will have no lasting impact. Cut to the chase. Be clear, be brief, and know the language of the people you want to influence. There are a couple of other important considerations in your communication strategies. Researchers and policymakers are not two distinct communities. People go back and forth between these two functions over time, so they develop some appreciation and understanding of each other's needs and interests. But at the same time, don't assume that if a policymaker used to be a researcher, that they will make better use of evidence. They must still manage the competing interests and agendas that make up any governance system. Finally, personal interaction is always going to be important. Having people on your team with good connections, building strong connections yourself matters a great deal. Third area is be clear on your audience. Each one has different needs, so each needs to be addressed in your strategy and tactics, but also monitored for the inevitable changes that take place in their interests and in their needs. Fourth area is time. A couple of dimensions to this. The short turnaround needs of policymakers means that researchers need to anticipate needs, and they also need to respond quickly, which is often not a researcher's strength. As well, patience and persistence are needed. In 1996, a commission called by the Government of Canada made a major policy recommendation concerning governing the affairs of the Indigenous communities in our country. And this has been a long-standing challenge that continues to be faced by government and after government, with ongoing negative consequences for the Indigenous communities. And in spite of the critical nature of the issues, that recommendation was only implemented in 2017. Public policy is an indispensable instrument for converting new knowledge to better lives and better futures. And the urgency is equally pressing for the research and policy communities. Systematic access to evidence-based research can dramatically improve the chances of deciding and carrying out policy that achieves intended results and attracts durable public support. Researchers and policymakers do not always speak the same language, but they can find common cause in the pursuit of policies that improve the lives and conditions of their communities. Your challenge is in defining that common cause, and I hope these remarks can help you in thinking through that challenge. Thank you.